many knowledge workers have it in our heads that we are only our heads. It's easy to forget that we're mammals, entire physical beings with emotions. Conventional wisdom holds that humans are at the top of the food chain, and yet many people often experience life as prey. When someone feels unsafe, they feel that feeling in their bodies viscerally quicker than they can think a rational thought. And when someone feels unsafe, they cannot think that feeling away. Now, our hyper-vigilant use of screens for work and play can put us into a sort of trance. Peripheral vision becomes a distraction rather than an asset. But eyes need the exercise of focusing on things beyond arm's reach. And bodies that are sitting attentively watching on camera grow very uncomfortable and unhealthy. And yet when we move to stretch and release that tension, the others that are on the camera watching, they start to feel uncomfortable. Rules about cameras on can not only trigger the prey response, but they can raise intense privacy and equity issues. Not everyone has a lovely space in which to take video calls. And concerns about personal appearance can have significant cultural and religious implications. Yet if we allow people not to have their cameras on, that diminishes their representation in the group. Their apparent absence in a meeting or a class has negative effects on that group. And further, if people stay off camera for a long time, they may grow to feel even more invisible beyond this meeting. What could this world look like if every person felt like they belonged on this planet? And what could life be like if everyone learned to value something in people that seem very different from them? In my work, leading professional development seminars, I work to build a sense of belonging from the very beginning. Groups cannot collaborate effectively without building trust with one another first. Now, if you lead seminars or meetings online, demonstrate the behavior that we desire. Arrive in meetings having broken the trance of screens, having moved your body and hydrated and fed it, and arrive with the intention to move while you're on screen, giving others permission to do the same. Also, we should arrive heart forward with the intention to build belonging and lead activities so that others can do all of the above. Leading a culture shift towards belonging takes time. It takes focused effort. It takes the participation of the people you're working with, and it takes vulnerability and leadership. I have this stage, and that gives me power. When I lead online meetings, I literally have the power to mute everyone. There are consequences to this power. And my very identity mutes a lot of people. I am a white, cisgender, able-bodied, educated, middle-class American who lives on land stolen from indigenous peoples. Each of these descriptors grants me power in this society. Power itself is not necessarily a problem, but a lack of awareness of the consequences of my power is. Now, to mitigate a bit of my power, when I start meetings, I like to begin with the transitions activity. I set aside a few minutes on a timer and offer the group this invitation. You may speak something that is on your mind. You may speak a question or a thought about the work we're about to begin. Or you may sit in silence. Any of these options are designed to bring you to the here and now, to the present moment. This is not a conversation, and the only responses allowed are nonverbal responses. Now, when we hear what is on people's minds and in their heart, we can see who needs extra patience or kindness today, who may need extra space for strong emotions, and who, quite frankly, may have better uses of their time today than my meeting. The person who speaks and is listened to can have a very profound experience. The person says that thing, and they may be able to set it aside and take a breath and be here for what we're going to do. Silent witnessing is imperative. If anyone leaps in to fix, that is a power play against the speaker's agency. By now, most of us know that video meetings tend to be a giant lecture hall. That's not a good space for collaboration or learning. It's much better to interact in small groups around content. So don't be afraid to use the tools, use breakout rooms, use the chat box strategically, and add Google Docs or other collaborative applications to better frame the conversation and invite more engagement. That engagement might even continue beyond the time frame of our meeting. I really want you to get the message that small groups are important online. In them, each person is seen, and they have a voice. So when you do breakouts, give very clear instructions, set a time limit, and give them a prompt or a question to talk about while they're in the breakouts. Also, every time you ask a question, allow 60 seconds of silence for everyone to think before anyone speaks. I encourage you to send people in breakouts in pairs and invite them to have a walk and talk. Even if they are just pacing back and forth in their respective rooms, that physical exercise breaks the trance of sitting still. And who doesn't think better without a camera in their face? When people are in breakouts, it's important that they know that you are still responsible for them in the session. So let them know in advance if you will ask the breakouts to report out verbally or in writing. And then, in the breakouts, send them broadcast announcements to keep them on time and on track, to remind them to pick a spokesperson or a scribe, and to warn them before yanking them back into that giant lecture hall, because that's so jarring. Now, participants who have been in breakout rooms are seen and heard, so they feel more belonging than in that giant lecture hall. And so now we want to think about what the goals are of this particular gathering. And to do that, we use protocols or structured conversations. There are protocols for brainstorming, for looking at data, for analyzing and considering dilemmas, for all sorts of things. Nobel Prize winner and TED speaker Daniel Kahneman advised us years ago to slow down our thinking for better results, and structured conversations facilitate that type of engagement. They also allow for you to know that everyone is speaking in a group. So I encourage you to keep track of who speaks, and you can do this on paper, who speaks and who has not had time to speak yet. But if you use an application, that application can report back very clear data after the fact to let you know that in this meeting, Bill dominated the conversation. He spoke 21% of the time out of 13 participants, and Amanda and Debbie barely had time to speak. Consider what you are missing from silent or silenced voices, and engage with them to learn how they want to participate. It's important to know and show that their input is valuable. Otherwise, why invite them to the meeting? Now, I like to close meetings with a survey. Ask a few questions that can be answered anonymously. Some favorites: what worked today? What didn't work so well? What else might you like to tell me? People can answer this anonymously, or they can write their name or email address if they want a private response from me. They can also draw a box or brackets around information they want to keep private just between us. I read all of these and consider how to improve the next conversation that we have, the next meeting. And when we meet next, I read out many of these comments, keeping confidential as instructed. How many times have you answered a survey that seemed to go into thin air? Hearing your words spoken aloud in the meeting can be very impactful. And when you hear other people's voices, you realize that not everybody looks and sounds like me. And that is actually fundamental to good collaboration or learning. We can connect well online. It just requires some different strategies. Many of us will continue to work remotely, but we should not have to feel remote from our colleagues or classmates. We can do our work, build our belonging online as well as we do it in person. Thank you.